All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Traffic Trade Group, and it is Thursday, July 7th. Wow, pretty nice day overall. Risk on type of day, I would definitely categorize that because if you look at the sector distribution for the day, you see a lot of higher beta areas of the market outperforming. We'll get to that in just a second. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out anybody's recommendations. Everything that we're going through is for education purposes only. So what do we have here in terms of the leadership? Once again, the Q's outperforming along with those small caps. Both of those areas up 2% for the session. Very, very strong. Also a nice rally from where we started the day as well. I always have this column highlighted with movers because I want to see what happens over the trading session, not just in the overnight session. So you got, Q's up 1.8% over the trading session, and the small caps followed as well. VIX also kind of confirming that move. The VIX is now down to what, 26? So why don't we start with that? We'll start with something a little bit different today. We're kind of this has been such an odd range for the VIX, back and forth between basically 35 and 25. Eventually this thing is going to break, and it's going to break one way versus the other. Maybe watch, keep an eye on the lower 20s and around those mid 30s, but obviously that's going to be, it's probably going to be some type of coincidence indicator in terms of what we're seeing. For instance, once we drop 20, if we drop below 20, you're going to see a move up in the indices at the same time, right? And it's the same thing with the VIX if it gets back above 35. But it is moving back to the lower range. Maybe also watch this 200 period moving average. Not that I like to chart the VIX, but just something to keep in mind. So that caught my attention today, just seeing the VIX, which was not down huge, but down 2.4%. Also, bonds were down a little bit more today. There was a reversal in bonds yesterday. Gold, silver, not much going on there, but yeah, big moves by, you have a bunch of sectors that are over 4 or 5% for the day. A couple of them, such as clean energy, blockchain, Bitcoin was up also decently today, which does correlate to, more of what growth stocks are doing. But you got the solar ETF in there. So really interesting. If you look at we can start here and then we can kind of go back to the indices, but solar is at a very interesting point. It's at the 200-day moving average. So again, like I in these end of day videos, I try to give you a sense of what I'm doing and what I think is kind of an easier trade or not. But I would be watching the solar ETF if it goes above the 200-day moving average, right? The more, in my opinion, the more that you can make your trades unemotional, right, and just have a systematic way of taking trades, I think the better, right? There's too much, and this is always the case with trading and what you see on financial Twitter, but there are so many opinions. Oh, this has to happen, that has to happen. I was a part of one Twitter thread, not a thread, but I guess a Twitter conversation where people are so in the weeds talking about what the Fed is going to do and how they're going to, reduce the balance sheet and what they're going to do. Is it this type of bond, that type of bond? Like, is that going to help you make any money at all? Trying to, get way into deep. And, I guess maybe some people can write about that type of thing. And, maybe it's interesting to, to kind of to talk about. And maybe that goes into like, financial publications like The Economist and that, it's interesting, but that's not going to make you any money. So there's all types of opinions and like people bickering about that. And, to me, it's a waste of time, right? To really talk about that. Price action is what's going to make you money. And I think, the solar ETF above the 200-day moving average would be really interesting. My favorite name in the space in the US is ENPH. I took a starter position in this. This has had several starts and stops right around this 206, 207 level. Maybe there's a seller in this thing. For now, I stayed in it, but I didn't really like how it finished for the day. It's tough to say when a name is up 6% for the day that you don't like how it finished for the day, but that's the type of day it was. And I think as long as it, kind of holds in here, if it breaks back below 200, then it could be another fake out. But I do want to have some exposure to this group, and that's usually that name that I trade around with. This one, on the other hand, DQ has been an animal, and this thing moves so quickly. This is not for the faint at heart. This DQ name, which is China Solar, is up to 70, closed at 77 today. And why I say it's not for the faint at heart, because if you look at this name, right, and the percentage moves, right, so this is really where position size comes in, right? This thing was down 5.6% yesterday. Today it's up 15%. And if you look at some of the other days, how this just generally moves this much. So if you think that you're going to put on as much of a position size as this in Apple, right, in my opinion, you're not doing your homework. Right, you can't have the same exact like notional size, like market value size, right? Let's say $10,000 in Apple versus $10,000 in DQ are going to be completely different. One is going to, the average true range is much less for Apple and DQ. So I mentioned this. I try to kind of give you some different tidbits and different points of view. But just one of the things, because if you're not paying attention to the volatility in some of these names, you could easily get shaken out of a good trade. And I just noticed that with a lot of the China names that sold off yesterday. And position sizes is really important. Again, 100 shares isn't the same of one name versus the other. This thing is an animal in terms of the way that this thing moves, and that gets you after 77, right? I've been holding a small position in this. I took some profits because this thing does scare me a little bit, the way it moves, given those percentage changes. So again, I've been in a position that I can kind of handle, where I don't get shaken out of the position because of the volatility. All right, so that was a very strong name. Let's go back to the indices just for a second, and then I will return to that. So there's not much really to say like that's like awesome in the indices, right? The S&P is moving back above the 20-day moving average. It's tough because when this thing has moved up a little bit and we start to see more setups, it's been kind of counterintuitive because things kind of halt at that point. So, I think it's important to stay, of course, to stay objective and to be cautious of the market moves as they go up, because we are still in a downtrend, right? The indices are still in downtrends, right? And you have to kind of say, okay, well, this could be another bear market rally. But at the same point, what I do is I really don't trade the indices that much. Unless I really see a nice setup, I basically just use them for when I see there's support or resistance. I mainly trade sectors via ETFs or single stocks. So this is above the value area for the week, right? We're also into where we stalled last week. So 3873. If we do get hit with some volatility, which is tomorrow, because there's only one more day of the week, that would be the level to watch. NASDAQ has made was hanging out here right on the top of value. And that's basically back almost to last week's highs, right? And again, this will be interesting if this gets above value, right? So we're going to be coming upon that pretty soon. That's a 12.3331, and also that 50-day moving average. Right, this is NASDAQ futures if you want to look at the Qs, because I know more people look at the Qs, but we're going to be hitting the 50-day moving average very shortly, right? And this was a little bit of a higher low. So the next point will really be 50-day moving average and this 300 level, which is the top of value for the month. All right. Of course, things are noisy right now, right? We had a couple Fed speakers. They're going to be noisy. Next week, we're going to get the inflation report, CPI, PPI, right? And then not too long after that, we're going to get another Fed meeting. Interesting what those Fed speakers said today, right? Which is kind of what I think is going to happen as well, considering that we have whatever they're called, mid-year elections, right? But I think that they're going to raise interest rates, markets pricing in still close to 0.75 percentage point when we have the next Fed meeting on 7/27. But then it could be a bit of a pause. Maybe they do another 50 basis points after that, right? And Bullard spoke today, and is kind of hinting at that a little bit. And I think it's just these times to kind of get through, right? I think it's good that the market is already pricing in the 70 basis points. And the market's not going to be caught off guard if they raise interest rates by 75 basis points. It's priced in, right? It's really going to be the language about what they're going to do and whether or not these inflation reports come in next week, maybe a little bit less than expectations, to start to see that inflation has topped. All right. Let's get back. So again, that's just a little bit of thoughts there. What else? Retail was hot today. I mean, you know, the biotech move, how could I not talk about that first? Just continues to see more opportunities in this. And again, it's another one of these more risk-on sectors. Biotech has made this big move from the lows. I actually sent out an article. Make sure that you are on this Substack distribution that I have over here, right? So this is something that I put together today, right? The name of the, like what I keep hearing all over the place is, hey, well, we haven't had this capitulation yet in the indices, right? We haven't had this final swoosh lower. And I agree with that. You know, we haven't really seen that. Usually big volume comes accompanied with the end of a market move. So yes, we haven't seen that, but we have seen it in various areas of the market. So, you know, this is where, you know, I think just doing the research to kind of look at some of these things, right? So one of the things that I highlighted was the volume that we've seen in biotech, right? If you saw this volume for the S&P, you would probably say, hey, that was a capitulation down here. Look at this heavy volume that was in XBI. Biggest volume it's ever seen, I believe, right? And that was here. That was at the low point, and you had a test of that, and it held and moved higher. You know, and again, what's interesting here is biotech was one of the first groups to go down. So as I've been saying now for a couple of weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the first ones to move up, right? What about China, right? China also started to break down before the U.S. did. Right? Look at the volume on the lows in the FXI ETF. Does that look like capitulation to you? You know, and I leave this for you to judge. But here's the low and here's the heavy volume, right? So if that's not the heavy volume, I don't know what would be it. So that looks like it's bottomed, right? What about, I know the one that everybody likes, and again, please make sure that you sign up to the article. Right? I'll retweet this out later, but what about ARK? Now, this is not, again, I use the disclaimer all the time with the ARK ETF, right? And when did this show, you know, has this shown high volume? Whoops, I got the wrong thing up. So I use the disclaimer all the time of, you know, I don't invest in the ARK ETF. I don't like how they manage their trades. So, but that doesn't mean you can't look through an ETF, right? Or for a group of stocks and make a judgment about it. But look at the volume that happened back here. Does this look like capitulation to you? Or are you waiting for bigger volume than it's ever seen before, right? Because on the low of this, right, it also had the highest volume it's ever seen. So, all right, so going back to what I was just saying, we have not seen that big volume. And we've not seen that big volume in the S&P. In the Qs, it's been a little bit more, right? So I know, because that's what people are looking for. They want to see that heavy volume on the lows. We did see a lot of volume in the Qs down here, right? We saw it to a lesser extent. So again, you kind of have to, you know, judge for yourself a little bit. Names that I thought were really kind of interesting for the day. I like that energy came back a little bit, right? This was VPOC to VPOC. Right, this was one of the better performing groups today, up 3.6%. You know, and you can begin to kind of look and you know, bottom feed a little bit. If you think that crude is going to hang in there at this point, which it has, right? It is not broken below 90. Also, Nat Gas had a big day today off of the 200-day moving average. So do I think these things go back to new highs? I don't know. But I think that they could rally a little bit. Nat Gas also found weekly top of value, right? So I actually added, you know, I was talking about this yesterday, like with a couple different setups, like Valero And there was a nice call buyer today in Chevron, which I added that trade at the end of the day. Just a little bit of energy exposure. It really has to stay above 144 for me, right? That's kind of turning the corner versus, it could fail here and go back down. So really, I would pay attention to that 144 level. What about the semis, right? We were talking about the semis the other day, specifically the weekly chart of Qualcomm, which found support at 121. Right, this is a name that's seen a whole bunch of call activity. So nice to see the semis, right, rebound a little bit. Right. Also Marvell, which let's face it, it's not showing relative strength, even though it was up 6% today. Right, but you've got a level to trade against. Right, 39.50 on the weekly chart. That's your support. Right, ON Semiconductor, another name. Right, that still needs to be. I mean, even though it had a 9% day, it still has work to do. Right. In the semi group. And I really like what's going on in terms of small cap growth. GTLB, which is a name that I started the other day, 2 days ago, and then I added in that inside day yesterday. I'm seeing a lot of charts like this, right? A lot of charts, which I think I went over. I didn't do a video yesterday, but the day before, a lot of names that are going sideways and now reclaiming some of those moving averages, like the 50-day moving average, right? You could look at, I think I talked about Snowflake the other day. Snowflake kind of had a little bit of an inside candle yesterday. This is out of the channel and moving higher. Even something like an Etsy to me is interesting, right? Why is it interesting? Well, because it's already had a big, massive move to the downside, and now it's basing, right? And it's trying to turn back up. Again, I'm not saying that this goes back to the highs or anything like that. I just think for a trade, right, maybe this thing can move up to 100 or even 111. That would only be retracing part of the move, right? So, and this is not that expensive. If you look at the PE, I think that's in the high 20s. So again, it's a little bit expensive, but it's not like it was. All right. So, there's a lot of possibilities in here. What else did I trade? Let me go to my trades, which I didn't even bring that up. MDB, I didn't trade this one. I didn't want to get involved in every name today, but MDB is starting to look interesting if it can get above that. There were some calls that looked like they were bought for tomorrow's expiration, right? Some of these names which had good earnings, right? Maybe they can get going, even though they're still kind of expensive, right? Team is another one that I talked about a week ago, right? Same thing, trying to move out of this, maybe not as much as a sideways base, but at least above the value area and now above the 50-day moving average as well. BILL is another one in the software space, Build.com, right? That has more of that kind of sideways base. And again, where you're going to be wrong with these things. If they're now above the 50-day moving average, maybe use that 50-day moving average or the top of value as your support. All right, that's Build.com. And then of course, looking at the more of the same. Let's see if do I want to go into a bunch of these names or not. In terms of the biotech names, I traded Halo today, which I love this breakout. Right, really nice move here, up 7.3% for the day. So high momentum name. Look at the volume today, too. Strong volume. I like this pattern. So I did a lot of starting of positions because some of these names, they move so quick. They're up like 5 or 6. They're up 5 or 6%. All right. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading a headline about Twitter. Must deal to buy Twitter in serious jeopardy. That just hit the tape. Sorry for my distraction. But yes, some of these names, they move up so quickly, right? On in the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the day. VRTX, by the way, is doing quite nice. This is a trade I put on about a week ago into some support. This is making a nice move. I took off my my WWE on this. I think it could still go higher, but again, like some of these trades, I'm not being super greedy. That was one of the things I said coming into the month. I sent members a P&L video recap for the last month, and I didn't grab profits enough last month when I had them. So I'm trying to not, make that mistake again, right? couple other biotech names. This Twist has been, talk about another name that's been down, again, similar type of pattern, right? Downward trend, now above the 50-day moving average and doing something different, right? NTLA is another one in this space, right? You could break up 15 or 20 of these things. They look so similar. NTLA is making a nice move, even like a Moderna, right, is doing the same thing out of the base. Big move in Moderna today, up 8%, right? So a lot of opportunities in some of these names. Again, you just kind of have to keep an open mind, right? I love to see things like this, start to materialize where it's more of a risk on area of the market, right? And that's something that I truly believe in too, is that you will see some areas of the market begin to act better, right? Some names before the overall indices turn, right? So I view this as really good progress. We were not seeing this, previously on the other bear market rallies. So, staying objective. I think what's going to happen to a lot of traders, not to make a prediction about how people are going to trade this, but once this market does eventually get going, and I do believe it will get going, because all bear markets end, right? I know that the doom and gloomers, want to see things go lower and lower, but it is the case in any situation, any bear market that has happened in the history of the United States, it is resolved, and it is resolved higher, right? So that's the side that I'm, being, again, patience is important, being objective is important, but that's the side at this point after this type of decline that I'm on. And of course I have to see confirmation of that, but I think so many traders are going to get caught up in, oh, I got to play both sides. After a bounce, I'm going to try to fade things, right? That might work for another time or two, right? But eventually, I think that you're going to want to follow the price action, and what some of these signals are telling you. All right, guys, that's it for tonight's video. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.